courses, and then I coordinate those with group of grad students, and then I also started a master's degree, which is teaching the technology majors for people to be like the tech specialists in their school, or at least the techie person on their team. You know, we're kind of promoting it as, hey, you don't need to get a master's in English because you need a master's in a specialty skill, which you may or may not use to go into something. Anyway, so that's pretty new. So the deal is that last year we had, this is kind of how educational stuff works. In July, someone came up to me and said, hey, there's a chance that we can give every iPad to every undergrad, every teacher ed student. And then they were just like, so we think we're just going to give them to the faculty and the students at the same time. What do you think about that? And I'm like, God, be kidding me. And I went off. I just totally said, you can't give them to the teachers and the students at the same time. And so then they went back to the dean, and the dean says, well, write up what you do. And the dean's like, okay, let me think about it. We didn't hear anything about it. And then on August 15th, we do the State of the College address. And on August 14th, my friend was proofreading his notes, right? She was the associate dean. And she calls me and she goes, iPads are in the notes. And I went, you gotta be kidding me. And so by October 1st or 2nd, all the faculty had iPads. And by December 5th, all the students had iPads. And so we're finishing up our first year. And it's really done, it's like almost educational innovations. What we really want to do to study it is a little difficult because it happens so quickly. But it's very interesting to see there's a certain organic feature to it because the students are learning while they're doing. But the one thing is that they don't realize that professional development and opportunities to learn how to use some new technologies are not something that will always be available to them. They're under the assumption that when you're in a school, that if they give you a new piece of technology for your classroom, there'll always be a class, right? And so you all know that's true, right? And so one of the challenges we're really having is the students to realize what a special opportunity they have. Because they think, hey, well, I'll figure it out, it's no big deal. So.
And how's that working?
It's interesting. It's interesting to not take it personally because I have a field of dreams problem. I've built a beautiful field, and if I build it, I want them to come, but they don't. So, but it's an interesting thing because I think there's an expectation that the way that students use technology in everyday life, if I ask them to tweet or text something, it's no big deal, but it's personal, and they feel like I'm invading their personal space. If I talk to them about using Twitter for education, they're kind of like, I don't know about that. Twitter's really for me to follow Kim Kardashian and see how big her butt has gotten. Are you recording that yet? But it's interesting because I don't know about you, but I'm finding, Tom, that that the knowledge of the students coming in is more compartmentalized than it ever has been. This is what I do for myself, and this is versus what I do for a classroom. They don't envision their technology skills being applicable to a classroom. They don't make that transfer, and I think it's growing more marked, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's, as I said, I think there's always a little bit of a, I don't know, a shift or whatever, a shift needed in terms of mindset regarding technology as you move from just being a technology user and a consumer of technology versus thinking about how to use it to enhance your classroom, to enhance what students are doing with regard to their own learning, to enhance the enhance the instructional activities you're going to do or whatever. And since I was a teacher all the way up until all the different teacher ed students I've worked with over the past 50 years or so, I still see that as I haven't seen that really as a challenge that's kind of dissipated very much from that. The tools change, but in terms of the thinking about how to use those tools. Mm-hmm. Still, and it is a challenge, and it's interesting you bring up classroom management and talk about that because when we do exit interviews and surveys with students after they graduate and they go out, that's always the one issue that they always say that is the most challenging to them as they leave the program and what they wish they had gotten more about.
Yeah, and that's what we always say too.
Well, and it's trying to get students to think about, many times, classroom management is good instruction. Yeah. They go hand in hand, and by thinking about how to, thoughtfully use technology to enhance your own instruction. That's thinking about classroom management at the same time.
I think the other thing that I find interesting, and I'll have to say this, like I'm not like, damning students by saying this, because I was the same way when I was a pre-service teacher in my first teaching job, to the point at which I called up the woman whose classroom was next to mine and apologized about 5 years later. And just said, God, I was a know-it-all little snot, wasn't I? And she's like, yeah, they always are, don't worry about it. But, I get a lot of students that say, I can't believe that they have all these iPads and the teacher's reluctant to use them. I can't believe all this technology's there and they don't use them. But then when I talk to them once they're out in the field, like it isn't an actual study, but just anecdotally, we have a lot of iPads, but it's just too difficult to figure out how to use them. And so it's interesting because they definitely, when they're still a pre-service teacher, they're very optimistic about how they wish to use the technology, but they're not always, they're very judgmental about others are not using it, but when they get into the practice, they do tend to go back to their comfort spots, which is classroom control, lockdown.
I'd be surprised if you didn't see a shift in that pretty soon, though, because at least like in our area, the high schools are all making that shift to go one-to-one. And so now that means in 4 years, they're gonna be those pre-service kids, you know what I mean? And they're gonna be like totally used to it as a educational tool. So I bet that'll shift fast.
I hope so.
I've already
Yeah.
seen it.
Just because they've used it
We-
in
we-
the
we-
younger
we-
years
we-
and then
right,
they get to
we-
you.
Right. And when we went to one-to-one science classrooms and integration of those netbooks, the change I've seen in the past 3 years since that adoption. Because we did that, 3 through 8.
See, now the interesting thing with that though is, so I did a study years ago when I was here of a school that, was doing a technology integration project where they brought in, technology for a school. And they did it in the middle school. And then later on, they did another, that wasn't part of that study, but they did an integration and they decided to start at kindergarten. And what they had much more success, what I heard from the teachers, is when they started at kindergarten, because the kids drove it. That there was an expectation, well, we did this in Mrs. So-and-so's class, so why can't we do it now?
Mhm.
And I think, that they're starting to see that this whole, the elementary school just needs the high school and middle school's hand-me-downs is changing. And I think the ones that go from bottom up end up having a better change.
Well, why don't we get started and set people quickly as we go. Are we recording?
Yes. Can you also put a sign on the bottom left or say integrating process not teacher?
Oh, don't you want people to be able to come in now?
It's okay, we don't really
We've
have a lot
got
of traffic
Sun
now.
Wan's manning the door.
Oh, okay.
So if anybody comes in there.
Oh, yeah, sounds good. So let's leave the door open then.
Yeah.
Just leave it open, thank you.
Yeah, I think Sun Wan is directing people.
Do you want to come closer?
So is it recording or not?
Yes, it is. I have started like 10
10
minutes
minutes
ago.
ago?
Yeah, I think, yeah, 9 minutes ago.
Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to our just afternoon discussion with our Jacobs educators. I'm Dr. Tom Brush. I'm the Barbara Jacobs Chair in Education and Technology here at IU and a faculty member in Instructional Systems Technology. And I'd like to welcome people for our discussion. I have a few questions that I'm going to pose to our teachers, just to again get some ideas and get their thoughts on different ways of using technology. But I'd like to keep it as informal as possible. We'll talk as long as we want, and definitely give other folks opportunities to ask questions and have a dialogue going and things like that. We are recording this. Is that okay? Terry,
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I'm going to start by asking our Jacobs educators to introduce themselves, and then maybe we'll just go around since I have a small group and have the others, all of you just introduce yourselves. So start with Mary.
I'm Mary Tapia. I'm the art teacher and I teach some drama too in a K through 2 building in Glen View, District 34 in Illinois, it's like a suburb of Chicago.
I'm Steve Auslander. I teach 5th grade in Washington Township, which is in Indianapolis. My school is called Allisonville Elementary School.
I'm Troy Cockrum. I teach middle school language arts at a private school in Indianapolis.
I'm Jeff Peterson. I teach 8th grade science at Center Grove Middle School North, which is up in Greenwood, just south of Minneapolis.
So as you can see, we tried to get a nice diverse group of teachers so that we have different teachers that may be kind of aligned with your interests or your areas that you're interested in.
Sure.
Who you are.
Okay, so I'm Teresa Cullen, and I'm an associate professor at University of Oklahoma and do the technology integration courses, and I'm on the selection committee for the Jacobs teachers.
Where did you graduate from?
I graduated from IU Bloomington. I was one of Tom's students in 2006, and I have tenure, and so that means he's good.
I'm Taryn Crouch. I'm a visual arts education major in the CEL program, and I'm a sophomore.
And the CEL program is our, as I mentioned a little bit about what we call that. That's our computer education licensure program in Indiana. And so we have so you may not know this, we do have a computer education licensure program. And so we have several students that are interested in that.
I'm Peter Hogelbaum. I'm a first-year PhD student here at IU. I've taught in middle and high school for 9 years, teaching band and orchestra. And so I'm here interested in project-based learning, problem-based learning, and how that intersects with technology.
I'm Xiaohai Jia, and you will call me Katie, and here it's easier. I'm from China, and this is my 4th year at IU, so I've been teaching W200, this is my 3rd year actually teaching the course. My interest is also helping pre-service teachers to be more confident to use technology in their future classroom.
I'm Danielle Sherman. I'm a sophomore studying elementary education, and I'm also with Karen in the CEL educator license, computer educator license.
Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. We have about, at any one time, we tend to have about 15 or so students that are in that specific licensure program. It's a license edition. It's a license edition, so you get a license in elementary education or visual arts, which is an all grades license or something, and then you can get an add-on license for computer education. So anyway, so welcome everyone. I've got a few guys that I have a few questions just to get us started, but feel free if you have questions or you want to follow up with anything. Like I said, we'll try to keep this informal. So let's start off. I'm really interested in, so I have selfish questions too. I'm really interested in how to use technology to support student engagement and getting students to do more types of inquiry in the classroom. And so the first question that I want to ask the teachers is, how do you do that? You know, and from your experiences in terms of using technology to support those kinds of things, what are some of the things that you do in your classroom to get students engaged with regard to using technology? Who wants to start?
I feel like, you know, devices, electronics, technology, like that's so engaging for kids, and with engagement, kids are gonna learn more. My kids love the ability to choose how they're gonna show what they know about whatever we're learning. If we're learning about the American Revolution, they can choose which, you know, program or app or what, you know, to show me what they know, and that's really, the kids have that choice, and that's engaging.
So what resources do you have in your classroom that you can use in your classroom to support engagement?
Well, I do a BYOD, bring your own device, and so, you know, there's tons of apps. You know, Sock Puppets is a lot of fun. Telegami is a lot of fun for as far as using apps. On the laptops or the student computers, just GarageBand for kids to create podcasts. You know, a lot of, like we were studying about Christopher Columbus, and my kids podcasted. They scripted out the negotiation process between Columbus and Queen Isabella, getting, funding to discover the New World, and they kind of acted that and podcasted it, and that was just one way to show what they knew about that. So it allows kids to have choice.
Right, I agree with Steve, that giving students the choice of, even having like a menu of items, instead of just telling them, okay, I want you to do a PowerPoint, you say, I need you to communicate these things. How the student then chooses to communicate those things is entirely up to them. And that's very powerful and leads to better student engagement, better application of the specific of tools, and it's just better practice than focusing on one particular thing.
So thinking about giving the students choice and things like that in terms of getting back to kind of managing activities or whatever. What kinds of guidance do you provide them in terms of different activities they do in terms of, with regard to those kinds of choices? So, like for example, what if they choose something or they want to do something, they're like, I'm not really sure if that's going to help in terms of the overall goal that I'm looking at as a teacher to try to get you to.
Okay.
What kinds of things do you?
Right. Well, there's two parts to that answer. Number one is you do have to scaffold that. You do have to provide, suggested tools that this would be something that you might choose, having an understanding of that you provided instruction on that particular tool. But the other side of that is, too, in order to allow for success, you have to allow for the opportunity to fail.
Okay.
And that you have to allow for kids to learn what they don't know sometimes. And am more than willing to sit down with kids and work them through those problems, but sometimes they will pick pick applications that are a little difficult and that it might not be as easy as they expected them to be, but you have to be able to work through that with them, both work through it with it as that student and be prepared to fail and succeed with them. I think that's real important.
Other comments?
Could I ask a follow-up question to that? So when you talk about the failure, that you allow for failure, how does that, one of the things that I see a lot of teachers are challenged with is that they want something that's going to be kind of clear to grade. Like one of the things that makes them nervous is kind of this open choice, is that how do I grade this? How do I decide what's an A and what's a B? And how if a student fails?
A good rubric will provide that structure.
Yeah.
That, that your presentation will include A, B, C. What that presentation is could be a podcast that a kid made in GarageBand. It could be a completely absent of technology, and it could be just a poster if a kid feels more comfortable with that. But technology provides another gateway that a kid can find structure in that. But I also allow for redos and things like that. So I'm very much a mastery type teacher, and I will accept things late and don't worry about late scores and those kinds of things. So I think that's it's important.
I think it helps to make that assessment process, the formative assessments and the summative, both ends of it, engaging for the kids too, because that used to be a super painful part of the process, especially with the little kids and not being able to write to their self-reflections and things like that. And so now it's just all folded in. Their work is documented, they can talk about it, it's recorded, they can, there's a lot of different ways for them to even make that part of the learning process engaging.
Any other comments on that?
And just that, technology allows that because, there's the reality, whenever I hear teachers talk about regrading and things like that, the reality is, I have 150 students. And technology allows me to be able to do that in a much easier way that I was not able to do before I had a classroom set of one-to-one netbooks. Then it was much more difficult, much more labor intensive in order to deal with the grading and all that part of it, and now it's a lot easier and to manage that volume of students.
Can you provide one specific example? Is that like a learning management system where they submit everything in one place, or?
I think your question is that, how do I manage that as a teacher and
So you said, like for the grading part, with
Uh-huh.
technology, it can be faster as compared to when you did not use technology, right? So can you provide one specific example, like what you have done before?
Okay.
And by using what kind of tool now it's faster
Okay.
because of what?
Okay, so for example, in the past, if I had a writing assignment, I would say give a writing prompt, and the students would handwrite or even type their answers, and they would print that out, bring it in, staple it to a rubric, hand it to me, and I'd have these stacks of 150 things to go through. Now, electronically, I can digitally send that out to students and have the rubric as a digital rubric. I can then bring it up on multiple devices. I can bring it up through Google Docs. I can bring it up as something as simple as my phone, my iPad, or a computer. The bigger the screen, the better it is. But and at home, I can have like the actual student example up here, and then on my iPad, I can have the rubric, and I can check it off, and it sends it automatically to that student. And so I can sit Sunday afternoons, I can sit and watch football and be scanning the kids' work, doing work, doing work sitting on my couch, and it's a much easier way of managing that versus pencil, paper, and it just goes a lot smoother. I mean, whatever reason it is, I can grade 150 student reflections in maybe 2 or 3 hours of work, where before that would probably take me 6 to 8 hours.
So along that kind of is a good lead to the next question. Let's focus on your classrooms and your teaching. And I've always told my students, whether it be, mainly teacher education students that I've worked with, I would say, it's not that technology, that you can't do things without the technology, in terms of instructional activities or whatever. But there are some things that technology, the affordances technology can provide, really enhance your classroom, what you can do. So I think that's the question I pose to you. Think about, in terms of your classroom, in your teaching, what are some things that technology has allowed you to do that would be really difficult, but not impossible for you to do without the technology in terms of enhancing your classroom?
So, we did a really neat thing, Keen's Arcade Cardboard Challenge. We did that this year, and we were able to Skype with Nirvan, who was the creator of the video, and was so engaging for my kids. They got to show off all their cardboard games, and then my kids created podcasts inviting people to come to their arcade, and we posted them on KidBlog, and so people could hear their podcasts all over the world. And I tweeted that link out to the Keen's Arcade people, and my kids were so excited that their advertisements were seen in Japan, because it was a little map, and the kids saw that their advertisements were seen in Japan and China and all over the world. And there's just no way to get kids writing and kids' messages out around the world without using technology.
Can you tell them a little bit about what Keen's Arcade is? They may not know.
So Keen's Arcade is it's the coolest thing. It's a story of this little boy out in East LA, and over the summer he works in his dad's auto shop, and his dad allows him to use the cardboard from all the parts, and he builds this elaborate amusing arcade out of just cardboard and packing tape. And somebody named Nirvan Mullick comes by to pick up a door handle and sees this kid's ridiculous arcade. And he's actually a filmmaker, and he does a little documentary. And he spreads the message of this kid's arcade on the internet, and they do a flash mob, and thousands of people show up and to come to his arcade, this little boy's arcade, and that goes viral. And a year later, all over the world, people are building these cardboard arcades. It's called the Cardboard Challenge. It's just cardboard creativity, So, we did that, and we did a lot with technology.
I would say technology's allowed me to create much more asynchronous learning environments. And take me out of the equation. It's no longer teacher-centered. I'm much easier to be student-centered with technology because it's much more efficient. They can get instruction without me having to be there. They can collaborate with each other without having to trade papers back and forth. And so it's allowed just a much more student-centered environment.
Give an example of what you do in your classroom to promote that.
What do I do in my classroom? I mean, we use Google Apps. I've used Google Apps for 3 years now, so we do a lot of, you know, I have the rule, three of their peers have to see their work before I see it. And so I just set up Google Forms where they can read somebody else's work, enter their evaluation into the Google Form. It automatically sends that student an email and me an email with their evaluation. And then the student can read that evaluation, respond to it in a Google Form that comes back to me and their student, so they can collaborate without ever having meetings on Zoom together. Oftentimes they are, but it facilitates that communication without me having to be there switching papers for them.
Is this like the script of Google Form?
Yes, that's an AutoCAD script.
For me, I think it's putting the power of the individual power in their hands. For example, you know, our whole basis of assessing in the arts is growth over time. And so I would have these huge stacks of physical artworks. And in order for the kids to actually see growth over time, you'd have to pull out the whole thing, pass out everybody's, and they'd have to lay it all out. And it was super cumbersome. It just didn't happen very often because it was so cumbersome. But now it's all in their hands on their iPad, and you can just open up the albums, and they can see and they can compare. And so that is just super powerful.
And one thing that shouldn't be understated as well is that, you know, while the teaching part is important, a part of our as being a teacher is just the business of being a teacher as well. And so, you know, the fact that I can now have a tool in my hand that I can access my, you know, take attendance on, and that I can, you know, take pictures of student work and have that as an example that I can share later on. You know, just the business of being a teacher is now enhanced through technology as well. And I can pull up, you know, while walking around my room, I have the tools to be able to pull up, you know, specific test information on students and be able to look at that information as well as several years back, whereas before, you know, you would have to it'd be very labor intensive to be able to access that information. It's typically in the office and you'd go do a counselor and all that kind of stuff. And now I can get that stuff in real time and have nice graphs, and I can look at that, evaluate that kind of stuff.
Another thing that really enhances instruction is, you know, Troy does a lot with flipping. Like let's say in math, I realize, oh, you know, I wish my kids had a little extra help. You know, while the kids are at lunch, it take me 5 minutes to make a real quick video, and then I could post it, make a QR code out of it, and scan it right to their homework. Boom, their little tutorial is right there. I post it to my wiki page as well. It just allows for you know, kids to get that extra help.
And better communication with parents. I mean, you could, you know, communicate that information, show examples of problems. You know, it's so much more effective now when I can talk with a parent or email a parent and have examples of, you know, this is what I'm seeing from your child. Take a picture of it, and this is, you know, this was the model that was shared, and you know, it makes the communication a lot easier.
And like with projects, like I'll often make a video of me explaining the rubric, because a lot of times these big projects, kind of confusing. The parents are kind of confused, but if you make a quick video explaining the rubric, send that out, email it to parents, or post it on a wiki page. That's nice too.
Can I ask a follow-up question, especially for you guys talking about flipping? You know, flipping the classroom in higher ed is kind of the hot button thing, and I think, you know, a lot of people talk about it in K-12, but there's really not the infrastructure for it. And so I'm curious if you have support from your districts as far as accounts. I heard you say you have a private Vimeo account, which I assume you paid for with your own money.
with my art room budget money.
So you
not
did have
personal money.
budget, not
Yeah.
personal money. I guess I was just kind of curious for when you are doing these innovative things, what kind of support do you have in your district? How do you find funds for it, that sort of thing?
SchoolTube is what I use, and it's totally free. So I mean, it just or show me. So if I'm making a video of myself, like my face, it's really easy. I just turn my computer desktop around, pull my easel, and do QuickTime on an Apple product, and I just do a recording of myself, and I real quickly upload that video to SchoolTube, which is totally free, and you need any video on SchoolTube has been approved by a teacher, so you never get those inappropriate related videos that you do on YouTube, and I just upload it, and it's really fast. There's no need for it's free.
I host my videos on YouTube. The first, so I've been flipping for 3 years now. The first year I used Google Video, but then they killed Google Video. And I used Google Video because it was all in-house. They had to log in to see it. The next year I convinced the IT person over our school to allow my students only to use YouTube. And I took the responsibility that if something goes wrong, I'm going to take the blame because I trust these students. Now we've opened it up to all students this year. But I've found with flipping, the difficult part is not in the technology, it's in the classroom application and what you do. And most people, when they get into flipping, they're so focused on how do I make videos, how do I distribute it. That's not what flipping is about, and that's not what is the most difficult part. And once you get past that, it usually takes most people about 4 to 6 months to get past that point, and they realize distributing the videos is not very difficult. It's what are you going to do now if you run fast time? It's going to be so much more.
So when I talk about flipping, just want to make sure my understanding, we are talking about the same thing. So when you're talking about flipping, it's like before the student comes to class, you give them something they work with. Is that the same concept?
That's the basic, that's the media, what I call the media definition. It's video, home, work, and class. That's if you break it down to the very simplest, that's it, but it's much more complicated.
But I'll actually say that the flipping is more about take the flip that happens when the teacher is no longer at the focal point of the class, and so that's the real flip. I think that the confusion comes in. It's like the most effective flip classrooms I have seen have been ones where the actual watching the video takes place in the classroom, where it's a one-to-one class, and the kids watch the videos in the class and do their homework. So yes, they can watch it again at home, but you're not dealing with the have and have-nots. They all are on an even par there. And so the real flip is not they're watching the video at home and doing the homework at school. The real flip is the teacher is now in the coaching position, and the lecturing is done automatically, because that's that can happen. The delivery of the material can happen once, and then you share it with 5 classes or 30 kids or whatever it is. That's the real flip, and it's very powerful because then the student is in control of the delivery. An example that I like to share with people is that there is one of our 6th grade math teachers flipped his math class, and so all of his math lectures or notes were done. He did as podcasts, as videos. There were 3 kids who started that year as special services students at the very bottom of his math scores. When he started doing the flipped classroom, the students in control, so they can stop, rewind, pause, fast forward. They were in control of the lecture, and so those kids' notes were a lot better. They didn't have an instruction problem. They had a problem writing down the stuff as fast as the teacher was saying it. Those 3 kids then finished in the top 10 of his students at the end of that year, because they were able to process and take their time and not feel like they're holding the rest of the class back and those kinds of things. And that's the flip. And it's not necessarily go watch this video at home and come in and be ready to discuss it tomorrow, because not everybody has that access to those students.
What I say is the flip of, the video is just lower level process. So now they're doing that without me being present. They can still do it, I let them do it in my country. You don't need me there to do the lower level process. Now they're doing the higher level process in my presence. So I can do it. And so a lot of the criticism of the profession is that it's still teacher centered and it's very still pushing. But I custom make my videos based on what's happening in the classroom. So I can't really use other people's videos. So that's why I don't think Khan Academy is necessarily a very good model for that.
I would agree with that in the video part.
I do exploratory activities before I ever deliver any kind of instruction, and then my video is based on what happened in that explore activity. So I know what they need to know, and I'm not creating a much longer video than they need to watch.
Right. The strength of Khan Academy is now it has kind of moved itself away from the instructional videos, and now does when a student logs in there, or even my mother is actually doing Khan Academy too, because she wants to improve her math skills and understanding of finance. But it is, the kids take a pre-test, and then it uses an algorithm to then give them direct instruction on areas that they have deficiencies in. And so I was exactly where you were at until this year when I went back to Khan Academy and saw how it is now. The videos are there if they are struggling in a particular area. They can go and see, get that rudimentary instruction on that, on how to solve those problems. But it has a matrix now where it has these different links and pushes out content and gives rewards and badges and all these kinds of things. And so, in fact, I had a student who shared with me that she felt she was addicted to Khan Academy because she was spending so much time on it. And I said, well, why are you spending so much? She said, well, it's I'm learning so much. And I said, yeah, that learning can get really addicting.
So I kind of want to follow up for you, Troy, as you were saying that you make your videos based on your students. And I think this is another misnomer with flipping, is like a lot of people think, and we in higher ed are facing a similar issue, because I would say that flipping and MOOCs are in somewhat of the same category. Are you familiar with what a MOOC is? It's a
massively open online class.
A massively open online class. Thank you very much. I always get caught up in my letters. And what a MOOC is that, here the university is going to offer this class for free. There is no instructor, that we have videos of teachers teaching. There'll be activities. Yes, sometimes, but maybe there's 20,000 people in the class and maybe 2,000 complete, and that'd be good.
That would be phenomenal.
Right.
That's the knock on MOOCs.
Right, and the thing is that some of the better MOOCs include some pure editing and things, but generally they don't include direct feedback from the instructor or the designer. And with flipping, it sounds like you are redoing your videos all the time.
Well, the theme, it's interesting, because I like pointing out little common themes among what you're talking about with regard to technology. The themes I hear are, one big theme I hear is, provides me with opportunities to do different things in my classroom because I can deliver instruction. Right? And this isn't a long theme. I'd probably get in trouble.
No, you're all good.
Because I can deliver instruction in different ways, and then I can provide that kind of information to students, and then I can do other things, or I can provide that, and it frees me up as a teacher to be able to work individually with students or in other groups, able to scaffold them in different ways and differentiate and look at what students need and what they don't need. And I thought it was interesting to try to talk about that you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you used it, it's like you flipped it both ways almost. Because you said, well, I do something, and then I provide content, and then I do something. Was I wrong in that?
No, it's based it off of a model, Ramsey Musalam, who's in San Francisco State, I believe. He came up with this model, Explore, Flip, Apply, which is based off of, I forget the model he's based off of, but you do an exploratory activity without giving them any instruction, right, and just to find out what they're doing. But the flip is, here's some instruction to continue further. Then, then there's an apply stage, which is your final assessment stage. In the middle there, you might do some more explore, you might do some practice. But his whole theory is, it's not, video instruction is not bad, it's where you put the video instruction that is important. And it shouldn't be at the beginning, it should be somewhere in the middle.
Do you do explore flip apply like every class period or like every unit? So like you have like a whole week of explore and then you
It
go.
depends, because the Explorer could take, I could say, oh, this Explorer is gonna take 15 minutes, it'll take 3 days. You know, I go in with an idea of how long I think it's gonna take. It might be just one day that I do an Explorer and then say, tonight lunch is for you, tomorrow you want to reapply. Or I might take it over. Like research papers is several small Explore for like lessons as opposed to one big. And then I don't always do Explore for apply, sometimes I do peer instruction with that, so they'll teach each other lessons in peer instruction. So it's a mixture of those. It just depends on what I'm teaching, and it's very, my principal, when she said it in my evaluation, she goes, where's your lesson plan? I said, I don't know what it's gonna be, because I just know where we're starting, and I don't know where we're gonna end up. But I have an idea of where we're gonna end up, but the students are the ones who are discovering knowledge, and so you have to allow that to happen. You can't force it through a certain things.
So let's flip. We talked about all the wonderful things about technology in terms of and how you're using it to really support your instructors. What challenges have you faced with regard to using technology? Particularly love to hear about the BYOD. Any challenges BYOD you may face.
Well, okay, so we can talk about that. So for me, like I've learned, I started it last year, BYOD, and one kid didn't believe my rules about it. And behind his social studies book, he was checking Facebook, and made a very, very public, big showing of how he was done for the year. I do a one and done. One and done. If you mess with it one time, you're done. You're not to bring it back to school ever. And with that public showing, kids realized that was serious. The kids have to come in. They put it in the right-hand corner of their desk. They need to have a backpack lock, which is could be like a luggage lock, or it could just be a regular just locker or lock. And it goes through both zippers on their backpacks. And so when we go to specials, we lock up our devices. And if someone's going to steal their iPod or iPad, they have to steal their backpack. It's really hard to do. I was telling some people at lunch, some of my colleagues were very critical of this. They don't need to bring their devices to school, they don't need to do this. And one of my biggest critics, one of her kids at recess was videotaping a fight at recess. And all my kids have them locked up. So like, if they're gonna they may bring them anyway, might as well do it your way. That's kind of my theory.
So your school is a BYOD, just your
Just me,
class.
just me.
So how did, so out of curiosity, how were you supported in doing that? Was your
My principal's awesome.
Okay.
My principal is awesome. And other principals in the district, my principal, I had support from my principal and my superintendent, who's also awesome. Other principals were not in favor at all and very, very negative about it, so my principal didn't want me really talking about it too much to other teachers, because he was afraid that it was going to get shut down. My superintendent came, saw what I was doing, and made a comment like, I wish all classes in our district would look like this. And so, I've gotten support, a lot of support now. But I was met with a little resistance from other principals, but mine was all in favor. And hopefully it's going to start to catch on in my school. I've had teachers asking me to send them my permission slip. See what happens.
So if you had, kind of talking, one of the things that you mentioned in terms of access, and things like that, if you had issues with students that, with the BYOD, with access, or
absolutely.
the severity of that? Or?
Well, so on a given day, in the morning I find out who has the devices that day, and the challenge is if I only have 7, well then if I have plan to have kids and partners. Well, no, I can't do that, you know, so I gotta kind of think on the fly a little bit. I always have two devices of my own that I bring in. What I always do is when we partner up, I say, okay, if you don't have a device, stand up, and they get to pick the person they're gonna partner with. So at least they have some sort of say, they're not just not having the device and not getting to choose who they work with. So I do that. You know, and some kids are kind of bummed out that they don't have a device. Well, that's the way it goes, you know. I can't really do anything about that. The kids are really engaged by using the devices. It's so much fun. We use them for all kinds of different things. Socratic to buzz in, Padlet, which is just the wall wisher to take photos, to act out vocabulary words. It goes right to the board. So many things that we use it for. But another problem is Wi-Fi issues. Like a lot of times the kids just get dropped out in the middle. And, you know, that's a major issue.
But I think part of it is too an acceptance that you accept those challenges and you work through. You know, I think that sometimes it's easy to say I'm not going to use technology because of the problems that come with it, and yet they pick up a pencil and that has problems that come with it. You know, if it might break, you get up, you go sharpen it. You know, a kid forgets his pencil. You know, you hand him another pencil, and so you know it's a device. Just like any other device, you have a classroom set of rules or a classroom set of procedures that you deal with those problems. You know, I have one-to-one computer netbooks, and by fifth period, sometimes the batteries start to die. Well, I have some extra batteries over in the corner, and the kids are used to getting up. They see it flashing, they take it over, they put a new battery in, problem solved. And you know, you just set up a classroom set of procedures that deals with those challenges, and you accept that. I tell the kids, you know, we're on the cutting edge here, and so we're going to bleed a little bit, but we get through it.
We were in a unique situation last year where we had cards that we could use in the classrooms, but the laptop cards were like 4 years old. So, you know, it took them 10 minutes to log on and 10 minutes to log off, and so we allowed bring your own device just to enhance that for the kids who didn't want to use the school laptop. But then we ran into the problem where the kids were saying, well, I can't figure out how to do this, and they would have a device that no one else has. Right. And I would say, I don't have time to sit here and figure that out because I don't have that device either. So what we did, we went one-to-one Chromebooks this year because we found, we had some iPads and Chromebooks in the classroom, and the kids were using the Chromebooks a lot more. And so now our message is, you can bring your own device, but the Chromebooks are all we can promise we can support. And all your assignments will be able to be done on the Chromebook. If you can't do it on your iPad, you've got to figure it out.
I have a question for you about the Chromebooks. Do you have, when you got Chromebooks, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot is that schools get Chromebooks but don't think about the infrastructure, the Wi-Fi infrastructure. When you got those Chromebooks online, did it just everything crash, or did they plan for that?
We plan for that. So,
Other challenges?
For me, it comes with their age group, I think, because once you get them into the apps and that kind of thing, and they pick that stuff up, and it's like, but the simple stuff that you don't think about, like logging in and their passcodes and this and that, that's what the little guys have a hard time with. And even just like I was talking at lunch, like because some of the things I have to walk them through step by step, because it's the first time they've ever done it, all of a sudden we're uploading 24 movies at the same time, and so that's a bad system. And so just things like that, but you know, like you were saying, you just have to figure out routines and systems to, once you encounter the problem.
And I like what, I mean, under having the tech support, making sure that you have people there that are going to do their job so we can do ours. You know, because that having the Wi-Fi, that should, I mean, that's not something that we should have to think about. That's something that you know, the tech people should think about.
Yeah.
And you know, that really, you know, is important to have those layers of support, and you know, not only the tech staff but then the professional development staff to be able to provide teachers instruction, you know, before the launch of those things. There's certainly several layers to that success, to our success. You know, I, you know, am here as a teacher, but there are a lot of people that supported me that brought me here.
The kids had, their iPads had been upgraded to OS 7, and I didn't realize it until I was asking them to do something and it wasn't where it was. And so I said, you know what, just close them, we'll finish it up later. I didn't do my homework. And one of the kids said, do you have homework? So you kind of have to do that homework.
I thought you were gonna say, yeah, and we upgraded to iOS 7, and after 15 minutes, all the batteries are dead, so I didn't just my follow-up for me, we have, I mean, one of the challenges that we face in a large teacher preparation program like we have at IU is we definitely want all of our students to get as much experience with teachers in the classroom as possible throughout their programs. But it's hard. You know, we have full-time staff here that all they do is try to partner with schools and teachers, say, will you take one of our students, or will you let do that? And so naturally, the resources of schools are very diverse in terms of what they have available to them. So we hear a lot from students that say, well, when I went to school X, and boy, it just didn't seem like there was that much. So have you faced those challenges? I mean, are all your schools like, wow, we get whatever we want, or we have these, or do you face those challenges in your school, either ones you're working at now, previous ones, or whatever? And how do you handle those kinds of situations if you want to have those resources available to kids?
I'm blessed at my school,
Yeah.
but I think that the challenge is then you know, balancing those inequities that I see in the homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, you know, I allow for time in class to be able to watch videos and provide those resources in class before and after school and all those kinds of things. So so my inequities that I see are in the homes where but I'm also in a position where I can combat that by our school has those tools in the school.
No problem with that?
Our board is super supportive, so yeah, and we have a tech, an admin tech person, so, you know, he fights the battles for us, and yeah, I'm really lucky.
I wish I could have a one-to-one thing, you know, so since I don't, I do the BYA,
Yeah,
it's the best I can do.
But you have administrative that supports that.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what got us here, is that we are from schools that embrace that. I mean, teachers, there probably are teachers who are in schools that don't have that kind of support who could shine in a school that provided that. I have no doubt.
I think communicating with parents is important as well, because when I first started flipping, a lot of them, you just needed a small upgrade on the computer and didn't realize it.
Yeah.
I can't watch these videos in the morning. So I became almost a tech support for some of them, but just communicating and saying, you know, do you have a cell phone that they could use, or do you know, and they don't have the technology knowledge to understand. There are a lot of ways you can do it. Just communicate with your community, find out what they do.
Did you have students that went home and say, oh, I need a MacBook Pro in order to run Facebook, in order to see those videos? But I guess you use Chromebooks, so
Well, now we do,
yeah, that's far more.
I think probably that's also related to, you know, the student field experience placement. So there's, the other day in another class, we were talking about how there are two kinds of approaches. One is you put a student in different diverse group of places versus where you put student at like a really long period of time. So there are advantage and disadvantage. But if you put student at different places, they lack the component of actually have a deep relationship, but they are exposed to more variety. So if they have bad experience, if they have seen very little technology, they won't necessarily think, oh, I'm not going to use that in the future because it's not available, because they still have other opportunities to see other kind of things. So I think working with the placement people is also very crucial for our students.
Yeah.
Actually, I was wondering if I could flip your question.
Sure.
which is, you're talking about the challenges that you have as a teacher. Have any of you had the opportunity to mentor a student teacher or have worked with any of them in your building, like a field experience student or anything?
Yes.
So some of you have, some of you haven't. I just was curious if, when you think about your younger colleagues that maybe are a little bit less experienced, what, as an experienced technology using teacher, do you think, wow, I really wish that students would have this capacity or this, is there something that, like your advice to those of us that run teacher ed programs? Am I phrasing that well enough?
Yes.
Okay.
You mean in terms of what are teachers seeing that are working with our students that they don't have? Is that what you mean?
That, or like if you were hiring, if you were on a hiring committee and you saw a student came in and you're like, wow, this would be the perfect candidate because I could see them really be an innovative leader in our school. What are the kind of things that you're looking for, especially for our 2 students here that are in the program? I guess the other one left, right? But that are in the program, like what kind of things could they be working on as students to make them really to have the ability to be innovators like you are?
Okay, quality I would look for would be just the ability to be a risk taker and just try something.
Right.
I think that's huge.
And not to get focused on apps or even devices, just focus more on the process and the 21st century process and understanding how the interconnectedness of things. And because the process, apps will come and go, devices will come and go. It comes down to more of an understanding that, teaching is a process, learning is a process, and understanding where technology fits into that and where it might not fit.
Just to follow up on the follow-up,
Yeah.
Another bit of feedback we get, particularly with regard to technology from our recent graduates, not ourselves, but recent graduates, and we ask them, things about, well, how are you using technology and things like that, and many of them say, this is my first year or my first 2 years. I'm just keeping my head above water. I don't have time to think about technology or anything like that. What advice would you give those first-year people in terms of technology or in terms of using resources to help them? Because we get that a lot. I was interested in hearing.
Yeah, I would say just pick one thing that you want to really focus on. Do that well. Maybe it's having your class wiki page. Just focus on that. Go from there, build on that, add videos to that wiki page. I would say focus on one thing, feel really confident, and then try something else.
Because that one thing will inevitably lead you to more, because you're gonna want to do something and you can't without learning something else.
Right.
So that's a good thing.
And pick something that's going to be easy. You know what I mean? Don't pick a video project that's your first thing. Because there's a lot involved in that. There's a lot of scaffolding that you have to do, and so pick something that's going to be fairly turnkey and it's going to be easy for you to do, easy to assess. And do a little research on ask other teachers who have successfully done it. Develop a rubric and just develop it as you would any other lesson. It just so happens that you might be using some technology.
And I had a first-year social studies teacher last year, and I did a joint project with him using cross-by labels and Civil War. And I planned everything and did everything, and the whole time he was nervous, he's like, so I just hang out in class and let him work? And I'm like, pretty much, yeah. And it was just having somebody there to take away his anxiety. Was helpful for him. So that's what I would say is find someone who's going to do a cross-curricular project who's done it.
Sure.
And kind of rely on them for help like that.
Just one last question. We've got a few minutes left, and maybe more if anybody has any other questions. So we've done a little bit. So any other advice you'd give to teacher education students as they're moving forward with regard to how to be best prepared for that job market or whatever is going to be out there when they get done? So you each got 2 years left, you're hoping?
Yeah.
So what advice would you provide them?
I'm going to actually steal Steve's from earlier today, which was, don't be afraid to fail, and share that with your students. It's inevitable that you're going to try a lesson or try a piece of technology or something like that that's not going to go as you planned, and just demonstrate that to your students that failure is okay, that it's that you can maybe, okay, we're going to do the same thing tomorrow, but we're going to do it a little differently. Move your lesson plans over to the side and just share with your students the learning process, and share with them that you're human, you're not beyond mistakes, and I think that's a real valuable lesson to teach the kids, that it's a very teachable moment. Let that go by.
I would say most people in their first and second year fall back to how they were taught, just because that's all they know, and don't resist that urge, because education is changing so much, and principals and schools are looking for people who are willing to roll with that change and lead that change. And that's what makes you important. The teacher who's been teaching for 15 years exactly, because those old models aren't working. And be innovative, be willing to take on a new model, and don't fall back in what you remember from the new school.
Say engagement will bring success in the classroom for your kids. And technology is a great way to engage kids. So if they're engaged, they're going to learn a lot. They're going to do well.
All right. So let's open it up. Any specific questions that anyone has? I know that Terry has.
That's how I am. I'm trying this out. That's it.
Yeah.
Me and Taryn are in the W210 right now, and we're working on a project. We have to research expeditionary learning and experience learning. Do you have any experience with either of those?
You might define those for me.
Oh, okay. Well, expeditionary-based learning is where they have like a 12-week project, and they incorporate all the subjects into one thing, and they work like lots of field trips, and I don't know. They're like called crew members, and they work in groups, and it's very collaborative.
Okay.
I don't know. So none of you.
It's like thematic, like.
Yeah, it's by themes too. So they spend 12 weeks working on like one theme.
We sort of structure our fine arts like that.
Okay.
We work as an interdisciplinary team, and the kids have a question that they have to answer. And so, like, it might be, how can you show your everyday life in a new way? Or how can you use the arts to tell a story, or something like that. And so as they go to each of the arts, they have music, art, drama, and dance. And as they go to each of them, they have like a certain piece of the task to try to uncover, and then at our fine arts team meeting at the end of the week, we pull all those pieces together, see where they're at, and divvy it up again, farm it out to them again. So it kind of goes from big idea to smaller, we bust it back out, back in, back out, back in, and it does take about 12 weeks to get to the end, and then they have to figure out what's the best way to show what they've learned. And so if the performance or production ends up taking a different form each time, depending on what they decide is the best way to communicate what they know. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
But definitely having that team regroup at the end of the week to take what they've done and figure out where to reroute them. It's like trying to write the lesson plan. It's impossible. You just have to like see where they are.
Pretty organic.
Totally. 100%.
What's the other, expeditionary and experiential?
Yeah, experiential and like service learning, so like shadowing or like going in and actually like, I don't know, going into a job or something and hands-on experiencing like what it would be like to do that. Have you ever seen that in like K-12?
Our high school students do something like that, but not our middle school where I teach. I know the high school students do, because I've had students who have elected to come back to the middle school as their service and have helped teach or work with specific kids. In fact, I think it's required for high school graduation but I don't know. I've always been on the receiving end of that, not the delivery.
I know there was work done in Massachusetts with some kids, because we were looking at Project Spectrum, which came out of Project Zero's work. And they did take community experts and bring them into the classroom, and it was really little kids, I want to say kindergarten, but to help them with certain things that they were interested in. So they would bring in the architect and work through things with them based on the questions that they had. So you might look at that. I just sort of skimmed through the information, so I don't have all the details, but it was Project Spectrum was the name of the research project.
I'll give you another thing to look up. Another keyword you could be looking for is externship. I have a friend that's at North Kansas City School Districts, and she used to be head of the math and science program. And so for high school students, they would have them do externships where they would go in and do like 2 hours a day for like 6 weeks, where they were working in a STEM area, and they were getting those experience. And they also did externships for teachers, which was interesting. She did a project where during the summer, she went and worked at a restaurant and then had to come back and create lesson plans about budgeting and finance and stuff to understand how restaurants decide how they're going to spend their money and stuff. So I think externship might get you some other hits because it's a kind of a more of a buzzword for that kind of work-based learning. Thank you.
Did you get any background information on expeditionary learning? They just say go look
We've
at
been
some-
researching it.
So you know, so in expeditionary learning the model was developed by Upward Bound, and but I'm not sure whether this is good or bad, but it's the predominant model that's used by Crystal Academy, which is the school in the charter school in Indianapolis that was the downfall of one of state superintendent. So, but you might want to look at if you get a chance to do research on Crystal Academy, which they have one in Indianapolis. They've kind of tailored their entire curriculum right now to expeditionary learning. And so that may be, I don't know if you already do that or not, but that's another one. You can look them up and see what kind of units and lessons that they incorporate. And they do, just like you said, they have them in blocks of 12 weeks, and they have a theme for every 12 weeks that they go through, and have thematic projects where they incorporate all the different content areas into those projects. So I think that is interesting. Other questions from anyone?
I have a question. So you were talking about letting the kids fail in order to learn. Like if they're trying out a new thing and you say, well, you know, maybe that's not going to work. Sometimes you let them figure that out. And I'm a big fan of learning in that way. And so I'm curious to hear more about how you decide when to let them have that experience and when to scaffold them away from that experience. Do you make that kind of decision based on how much difficulty they're having, or whether it's a technology thing or a content thing?
Or when grades are due, or
Yeah,
when the bell's
yeah.
gonna ring, yes, all of that. I mean, it is, there's no easy formula to that, but I think that sometimes, you know, as a teacher, it's real hard to not solve the problem. And, you know, you want to, I mean, my wife tells me, just put Mr. Fix-It away and let me do it, and I get that, and so that's what's always in my head when I see a student struggling. I'll just say, put Mr. Fix-It away and just stand back. Now, you know, if the bell's getting ready to ring and this is the last work day that we have, you know, you do what needs to get done, but you leave every opportunity for that kid to get there themselves because of the value that comes from that. But certainly we are not teaching in a bubble. You know, we have challenges that come from that, and so you leave every opportunity for that. And there is no easy answer to that question.
Do you find that there's certain kinds of things that they predictably work out by themselves, and other things that You see them have a certain type of difficulty and you say, yeah, I'm going to need to step in there.
Yeah, or you can also be kind of situational and you'll say, okay, you know, I remember Caleb having this problem too. Why don't you go and see what he's doing, you know, or just kind of, you know, allowing kids to help each other. The ask three then me is a great thing to kind of keep in your head too, and to establish that procedure in your classroom. And I think sometimes teachers get caught up in the, you know, my classroom needs to be quiet, my kids need to be in their seat and working and that kind of thing, and it's important to let that go. And, you know, science, well, particularly science, you know, the learning process can sometimes be loud, and kids are going to get excited about that, and it's okay, and it's not, you know, a big deal that the kids might be out of his seat seeing what somebody else is doing, and they're not always doing bad things, you know, to give the kids some trust in that regard as well.
I always do ask them what they've tried, because students will let you do as much for them as you will do for them.
Yeah, sure.
So I would say, well, what did you try? Well, maybe try something else. And if they've tried a couple different solutions and they're not getting there, then I know they're really trying, and maybe I can step in. But if they haven't tried anything else, I'm just like, you know, we'll talk about that later. And I never talk about it later. Or I just, you know, I just encourage them to try something else, and that's how I kind of determine if I'm really needed or if they're just trying to get me to.
And I would say not everything needs to be graded. Like, you know, if I do an academic choice and the kids are, you know, trying something out and it doesn't work, that's okay. Like, not everything, you know, sometimes they'll post something amazing and I don't grade it. It's just, they did something amazing and they had a great time, and then our goal is to share it with their class, you know. So if they fail, well, I'll say it's the process, not the product.
Sometimes just having those questions in your back pocket that give you that time to put Mr. Fix-It away. So like just saying to the kids, well, what makes you say that? Or like, I like what you say, you know, well, what have you tried? Or if you did know, what would you say? Because they'll just go, I don't know.
Right.
Well, if you did know, what would you say? And like give them that time. That helps a lot because it takes away your jump-in reflex.
Other question? Yes.
Okay, so the question I'm just curious because I know what's going on in Oklahoma. I'm curious what's going on in this region. When I say Common Core, how do you, I mean, are you hearing a lot about the Common Core? Do you feel that your teaching is well prepared for the Common Core? I'm just kind of curious from in the field how that, in being a tech using teacher, how that is.
As a science teacher, I feel like I've been doing Common Core for years. I feel like that, you know, being a teacher that does a lot of projects, does a lot of inquiry-based learning, does a lot of includes a lot of literacy, includes a lot of math, you know, graphing, graphic analysis of that, sharing of that, a lot of technology. It is kind of this, you know, a validation of what I've been doing is the right thing. So I have no problem with it.
So we are actually already in Common Core. Even though the state's supposed to be the archdiocese is still forward. So we're actually in Common Core. I haven't seen, I've heard the biggest differences in math. Because in English, the standards aren't that different. And so, same with him. I feel like I've been doing a lot of everybody, so it hasn't been that much of a change for me.
There, in the arts, it's looking at those processing verbs and thinking verbs, you know, that our text is a painting. We're teaching them the tools to decode visually. And so those same skills that you use to decode written text is exactly what you're doing in your head to decode composition. So a lot of it for us is educating because like the higher ups want to just impose reading everywhere, and that's not really how I interpret Common Core. I really feel like it's more that 21st century thinking, and that's what we've been doing. So.
Just to follow up on that, you know, I really liked hearing you talk about using technology and different things when you talk about assessment and providing alternative assessments, different ways for students to demonstrate knowledge, which is kind of near and dear to my heart, particularly if I talk about affordances and magic projects. So how do you handle the mandated assessments? How does that interact with the mandated assessments that you have, whether they be state assessments?
My only problem with the mandated assessments is getting the information back in a timely manner. I actually like assessments. It provides me data. I utilize them a lot with having students analyze their own data, and have incorporated that a lot into my instruction. In fact, my problem with the mandated testing is we don't get that information back before for me, until those students are out of my classroom. So it provides me no information. Now, yes, I can look at that information as far as what the kid's coming in, but the information that I get from my pre-assessments, or just questioning the kids and demonstration of their abilities in class, is far more meaningful to me than what I get from any test.
The challenge too is that there is such a strict timeline with every standardized assessment that I find that the homeroom teachers have really little flexibility now to to integrate with other subject areas and that kind of thing, because they're on this timeline that is marked by the assessments. So it's kind of, in that sense, assessment driven.
But like if they're engaged in integrating technology, and they're really a lot, they're doing well on those state tests.
That's the mindset that I think has to shift.
Yes.
I don't think that's how a lot of people
No,
look at it.
I agree. Well, it's the same. I do a lot of partnerships with teachers in terms of integrated learning, getting unit problem-based units, design problem-based units, and it's a big issue. Mindset is, the ones that we work with that come back, that we're successful with in terms of partnering, are the ones that have the mindset that's like, well, this is great, and if I design this well and engage the students, they're gonna do well, not the assessment. It's not like this. The assessment is any. Many times the assessments that we're providing don't go as deep as the assessments that I'm designing in my classroom for the students.
Right.
So they're going to do well anyway. But once again, I think that is a mindset that isn't necessarily held by everybody. It can be daunting to kind of and worrisome, I think, to some teachers when these tests they tend to have such high stakes. Well, anyway, we've gone over this. That's okay. Let's give our Jacobs educators a round of applause.
Thank
so
you.
much. We got it?
Yeah.
Okay. And thank you